Well, the Cabbage Patch Doll is plain sight. It's putting in plain sight something that happened a long time ago. It's human cloning. So when the previous civilization were wiped out, and this was through civil wars, the Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, they got rid of as many people from the old civilization as possible. They repopulated using Caucasian babies en masse, and they were distributed across the earth to basically start a new civilization in preparation for the Industrial Revolution.
The world keeps lying, but he won't retreat on his quest for truth. Yeah. Truth, quest for truth. They can't stop me, they can't block me. Moving through, got that fire, they can't block me. Quest for truth, breaking chains, making waves. That's what I do. When they hate, I create.
All right, Mr. Guy Anderson, you came on my radar when I saw the book about the Cabbage Patch dolls, and I did a show about that, I want to say a couple years ago, and at the time I didn't even know you had written a book on this, and I think I'd seen a couple videos, and I had been doing a little bit of research myself into this subject, and talk about just weird stuff, man. Like I don't even know what to make of some of this stuff, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Guy, please introduce yourself to the audience and let them know what they should know about you.
Well, my name's Guy Anderson, and I am what you would call a conspiracy theorist. I suppose my specialist subject is Tartaria. But I have also spent 20 years in Freemasonry, and I joined because I wanted to find occulted knowledge. So my journey down the rabbit hole started in my teens, and I'm now so far down I can't get back out.
So you're in the Freemasons, you've been in them for 20 years, is what you're saying? Right now you're currently in them?
No, right now I'm not.
Okay.
I had to leave. What I've said and what I've written about them, it would be impossible for me to return. Not that I want to, because it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I slowed down my attendance. They only meet 7 times a year, but I slowed down attending, and I only went back for a brief spell because my youngest son wanted to become a Knights Templar.
Hmm. Yeah. How old or how far into the Masons did you end up getting? What degree, I guess? I guess 32nd is the highest, and then they have the honorary 33rd, and then they have degrees above that. I've heard, and I know you did a blog recently about, I think, up to 99 degrees, and I interviewed a man named William Schnoblin years ago who claimed to have made it to that 99 degree. And weirdly enough, I'm actually interviewing a 33rd degree Freemason, I think tomorrow possibly. And so I'm really interested in all this stuff. But before we get to that, what caused you to write this book? Where in the world did you run into that just said, hey, this is a reality. This is something that I need to look into?
It was someone called Max Egan. I
Okay.
started following Max Egan years ago, and I hadn't heard of Tartaria before, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, it seemed to just resonate with me, and it became an obsession. And I've looked into everything. I've been studying human cloning for years, Atlantis, obviously Freemasonry. Did we land on the moon? Are we on a spinning ball? Antarctica, and so on. This one appealed to me and became an obsession, I think, because it is the biggest cover up of them all. It it
Mm.
it it blows everything else out of the water.
I would have to agree on that, man. As somebody that really enjoys history, I feel like, growing up, my dad loved history. I loved history, and it was just one of those things that I could really feel like I knew a little bit about. And then, as I studied and found out about Tartaria, which I don't remember exactly what year it was. I want to say it was right around 2018, 2019, somewhere in that range, and started to look into it, looking into the old encyclopedias that we have and seeing Tartaria on these things, looking at some old globes that you'll see that have Tartaria on it, and I'm like, why in the world was this scrubbed? It doesn't make any sense. And so that is something that is one of the weirdest things, and I don't know what conclusions you come to about it. And you've definitely, from what I can tell, studied it in much more detail than I have. So, Cabbage Patch Kids, what the heck is that? Most people listening are going to say that sounds like a doll that I used to play with when I was a child. So, what is the Cabbage Patch doll?
Well, the Cabbage Patch Doll is plain sight. It's putting in plain sight something that happened a long time ago. It's human cloning. So when the previous civilization were wiped out, and this was through civil wars, the Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, they got rid of as many people from the old civilization as possible. They repopulated using Caucasian babies en masse, and they were distributed across the earth to basically start a new civilization in preparation for the Industrial Revolution.
Interesting. So I remember the orphan trains. I remember seeing a lot about orphan
Mm.
trains during my research. I remember seeing a commercial from what I was read was the first motion picture where they're this lady's pulling children from the ground. Now, is this a metaphoric cloning thing, or is this are they saying that they grew these children from the ground? And the reason I ask is because ultimately, in the scriptures we hear God formed man from the ground, and we're dust, and to dust we shall return. And in witchcraft and stuff, people have been mixing um, fluids, let's just say, and different elements of the world to try to create and try to manifest different spiritual things. So I mean, it's not like it's way far fetched, but I'm curious to hear your interpretation of that.
Yeah, the lady you're referring to is Alice Guy, and she was a French movie pioneer, but her backstory doesn't stack up. Her first movie is The Cabbage Fairy, where she shows you her pulling babies out of cabbages, and then the second one is Midwife to the Upper Classes, where she's selling them to people that come along to purchase babies, and that's what the Cabbage Patch Doll was about, a reprisal of that. But the history of human cloning goes back right to the very beginning. I mean, the oldest text we have that you could refer to as a Bible is the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's carbon dated. We know that the Old Testament is based upon that. And it tells you the story of us being created as servants by taking the Neanderthal, tweaking its DNA with a bit of Anunnaki, and pumping out a race of beings that can obey, have a lifespan capped, are built in their image, but not quite as powerful or as knowledgeable. And here we are today. So some people might argue that that's the story in the Old Testament is a metaphor where they take the rib of Adam to create another life. But it doesn't matter if it's a metaphor or not because it's a very old book describing cloning. So, and we know that the Old Testament is based, on much earlier text, the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, cloning is the beginning of our civilization. And you also refer to the homunculus and the golem in Jewish folklore, and that is the desire to create life without reproduction, and that's something that John Dee, spent an awful lot of his time trying to achieve. I think it was sperm and horse manure were the key ingredients.
It's interesting that you refer to the Bible more metaphoric than you do to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I would probably switch that ideology because Gilgamesh is a very it seems much more allegorical to me, whereas the Bible has a lot of historical names and stuff that can be tied to actual people. And I'm not saying it's older as far as text goes, because it just depends on what you classify something like the Book of Enoch or something along those lines, obviously, that are found in Dead Sea Scrolls, whereas they're not in ancient tablature. Different form of communicating and passing down information might be the case. And so I would probably disagree with you on that, but I totally get where you're coming from because ultimately these stories align on all of the fronts, whether it's Epic of Gilgamesh, whether it's the stories of the Enuma whatever, they all seem to tell the similar story to what the Bible is telling. In my opinion, this is what I see. I see a very universal story there. Whereas the only thing that I think we would differ on that is I believe the Bible to be like the actual legitimate record for that. Like I really do believe that. I know that that's foolishness to a lot of people. Whatever. I've studied the different ones as well, but I'm not here to debate that right now. But I do want to know, like, as far as human cloning, what is the biggest evidence of human cloning that you could find that's not written in ancient text? Something that we can grasp onto, people can go look at. What's your biggest evidence for this? And obviously, we have now human cloning, like Dolly the sheep and stuff, is a cloning type thing. We know that it's possible now, but in recent history, I guess you could say.
I think we've got to look at the population. In 1776, the estimated population in the world was 770 million. 100 years later, it had doubled thereabouts to 1.35 billion, which is hard to pull off considering the amount of men that died during that period of time in battle, because that's when a lot of the wars, the civil wars, took place. So it's quite a hard task to achieve, to double the population. But what they miss out is that during that same period of time, 3.35 billion people died. None of that stacks up. So how do you have a situation where you start off with 770 million people, and 100 years later, you've doubled the population, but in the same period of time, lost over 3 billion people through war, famine, and disease, and natural causes? So when you look at these postcards that became really popular, the Cabbage Patch postcards, the incubator babies, the massive amount of children that were being shoved around on orphan trains, that they say 250,000, but estimates are double that, and that the children that were sent to Australia and all across the world, the numbers don't stack up. So all you need to do is look at the population boom with a calculator, a pen and paper, and you can work out for yourself that it is not possible to repopulate to that extent without something else happening. And I think the Cabbage Patch postcards were showing us in plain sight. And of course, they were also known as repopulation postcards.
Yeah, I remember showing a chart of the population boom that seemed to happen all at once, like you're saying. I mean, from little population growth for throughout history, all of a sudden, boom, just a huge spike. If you're looking at the stock market, you'd think that something major, major, major happened, which it did, obviously. Um, Now, as far as the some of the stuff that you've mentioned before in your blogs, and I want to still stick with the Cabbage Patch ideology a little bit too, because I remember researching things like the Little Rascals, and it seemed to have interjected into the Little Rascals like these little hidden symbols all throughout. And I know that you've written about this and talked about this, so I really want to hear your take on this because this is boggling for people that like the Little Rascals. I used to love it. Free video rental at Blockbuster when I was a kid. You could get Little Rascals all day. So
I think it's everywhere, John. I think that what they do is they show us what's really going on, but they class it as fiction. So we see it in films like The Little Rascal, TV shows, and then we hear people like Kevin Hart speaking out and saying that they've been cloned. And Britney Spears and lots of other people have come out and said it too. So I think that there is this karmic retribution going on, that if they don't tell us what they're doing when they meet their maker, they're gonna face consequences. And I think that actually going back to Alice Guy, the interesting thing with her is she said that she took the inspiration for the Cabbage Fairy, her first film, from seeing Martin Cooney's exhibition of the incubator babies at the World's Fair in Paris. But what she doesn't tell you is that the film came out a year before the exhibition. So there are holes in all of these stories. But I think the key one is actually the dolls themselves, the Cabbage Patch doll, because the story to that one is really fascinating. They actually came up with a fictional story as a marketing strategy to promote them, and in part of that, you had to actually adopt the doll. They didn't want anybody to state that they'd purchased one, and you got an adoption certificate with it. And if it was broken and you sent it back to the manufacturer to be repaired, and it wasn't financially viable to repair it, they returned it to the child with a death certificate.
mm,
So there's a lot of, and also at Babyland General Hospital in Georgia, there's a lot of symbology there. When you first walk in the door, there's a wall covered in photographs of celebrities and famous people like Trump, John Travolta, all people that have been connected with various conspiracies on being cloned themselves. The floors, a Masonic temple floor layout, the same pattern. It's absolutely everywhere. But the story of the Cabbage Patch dolls that Xavier Roberts produced for marketing is that he, as a young child, went into a field he climbed through a waterfall, went into a field where there were rows of cabbages growing, and these things called bunny bees sprinkle dust from crystals on them. They come to life, and the first one that speaks to him says, "You need to find us someone that will adopt us, because if you don't, we're going to have to go and work in the gold mine." Well, this is the story of miners and where the name really comes from, why you would call a child a miner, because that was who was mining. And we can see that in old photographs around the time of the Industrial Revolution. There are no adults working in the mines. There's no adults working in the workshops, workhouses, and factories. It's just kids. There are kids everywhere. And the reason for that is because most of the adults have been removed.
Yeah, the asylums is something that really struck me. The Oddfellows, etc. I actually ended up when I was in New Mexico, I believe, well near the Grand Canyon. I actually had met the one of the head of the biggest Oddfellows lodges in Texas and baptized this guy. He became a believer and baptized him, and we talked. And the symbology is all over the place. It's just so strange to think about these asylums that were literally all over the place. And the Oddfellow thing is basically an orphanage type thing. And so it's a secret society where these orphans were basically, I would say, brainwashed almost into becoming this or that. I mean, we have like the Three Ring Circus is based off of the Three Rings of the Oddfellows. I believe that the guy that started the Three Ring Circus was an Oddfellow, and you just have the names and lists go on and on. You even have Albert Pike and people like that who were out of the order of the Oddfellows. So strange stuff. What about these asylums? I don't didn't get
Mm.
a ton of research into them, but I saw that they were literally everywhere.
Yeah, so the reset, the last great reset was 1776, and that was the start of New World Order. And obviously, the back of the American dollar bill shows everybody that it actually states it on there in Latin.
Hmm.
The Lunacy Act came out in 1774, so the Jesuits spent about 200 years preparing to reset us. Um, the Lunacy Act was really clever because if you look at these asylums, so if you look at sort of asylums from the 1800s, it doesn't matter if you're looking in New Zealand, America, Japan, England, Ireland, anywhere in Europe, anywhere in the world, they're all the same building. They're all red brick. They're Greco-Roman style with white brick detailing. And that's because red brick can harness energy, can store energy. It's the same chemical process that causes rust. So I think that the Lunacy Act was vital because what that enabled them to do, with one of the reasons you could be committed for life, was if your husband had died in battle. So your husband dies, you get committed, and your children then become property of the state. And that is where a lot of the children came from. A lot of children went into baby farms. Then we've got the orphan train movement as well. So there's this mass movement of children, babies. But if you look into it deeply enough, you'll see that every single one of them, doesn't matter where in the world you look, they're all Caucasian. They whitewashed the earth.
That's really weird, man, when you really think about it. So the idea, I've heard this, and nowadays everything is AI, so you don't know this. Is Trump's name mentioned in these world fairs? Is this a reality? Is this real?
Trump's name isn't Trump. Trump's name's Rothschild. It's all buried. They're all Rothschilds ultimately. And so it's very difficult because they've rewritten their own history, their own ancestry and genealogy to hide these things. So it does become difficult. Obviously Trump is connected to Nikola Tesla as well. It was his uncle that went into his hotel room, took the files. Donald Trump's now talking about reintroducing the World's Fairs. So I often wonder if he is trying to re-establish what came before because he has the information. It's very difficult to know because for every person that thinks he's doing good, there is somebody out there that thinks actually he's just part of the club, and going about it in a different way. So Trump's an anomaly. And then we've got the books with him as well. The books written by Ingersoll Lockwood, The Last President, The Adventures of Baron Trump, and so on. These are very strange. At the time they came out, no one bought them, but all of a sudden everybody's reading them. So Trump is an anomaly, requires a bit of deeper digging.
And that's what's weird about that book to me, because I don't know anybody that had one of those in their library prior to this boom of this book. I mean, I don't know anybody. And I'm not saying I know everybody with libraries. I know a lot of libraries and stuff, but like no copies of this before that. How you know, I guess just weird. A weird coincidence is all I can say to that. I don't know what to make of some of this stuff. It's very, very strange. And the Back to the Future connection with Trump and the Alice in Wonderland connection. I mean, my goodness, there's so many strange things connected with this man. He is an anomaly, big time. His gematria, everything about this guy is just strikes me as like just so much things, so many things. You saw the guys from the Kabbalists that were giving him, or this award, I guess. Basically, I don't know if it was an award. They gave him a gift and told him that his gematria was equal to, Ben David, Mashiach to Messiah. Crazy stuff is happening on this whole front. So Tartaria, how does that factor into Cabbage Patch Kids and all of that? And we're actually, real quick, before we go into that, I want to tell a quick story that talks about cloning. So a friend of mine, she was roommates in Hollywood with a lady, or a girl who's the heiress of a big, huge company. I don't want to mention the name because I don't want to get my friend in trouble or anything like that. But they freely talk about the cloning center on the corner. This is like something that in Hollywood everybody knows about. They have one literally on the corner of the street. That's what they call it. It's a big building that's got kind of sits back and spirals up into the hills. So crazy stuff. So Tartaria, what in the world is that? How does that fit in? Some people think it's the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Some people think it was the kingdom of the controllers of the world. So where do you stand on it? Tell us what it is, man. Crash course us on Tartaria.
Well, today we would call it the Mongolian Empire, but I think it should be correctly named as the millennial reign of Christ.
Hmm.
It's a thousand, but first of all, for that to make sense, people have to understand that the timeline has been altered. And the best person to research for that, and in my first book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, I have broken down his research because it's heavy going. He's a Russian mathematician called Anatoly Fomenko,
Yeah, I have his
and he had
books,
worked.
the issues
Ah,
with
they
Tartaria and all that. Yeah, yeah.
so 1776, the year would have been 976. So if we look at that from the birth of Jesus Christ or Yeshua, then we're not a million miles away from it being a thousand-year reign. And they're not saying that people that research this aren't saying that he lived and reigned for 1,000 years, but his ethos, his spirit, and his way of building that reigned for 1,000 years. And that's why we started to see these incredible cathedrals and churches everywhere, which were centers of healing. People used to go there to heal. They used the frequency inside, which was 432 hertz. The bells operated at that frequency. The pipe organs, which healed your internal organs, operated at 432. So everything was built, if you like, in an angelic way. And everybody worked in that same way. It was peace, harmony, frequency, balance, illumination, self-development. And then we entered New World Order, or Satan's little season. And that was the end. And the consequences were that if that wasn't allowed to happen, then these parasitic families that go back to Marduk or Amun Ra, um, were going to cause a cataclysmic event again, because they believe every time we get out of control, or we know too much, or we're not obeying as much as we were, or we've overpopulated, they wipe us out. And this is the Rothschilds that we're talking about, the children of Ra, the Ra childs. Amun Ra said that he was leaving everything to them when he fled. So that was the consequence of not allowing it. But it was a slow process. The Jesuits infiltrated everything. They started in Russia. They were rewriting history. They were buying the technology and then removing the people they bought it from. And they slowly infiltrated everything from Freemasonry to the Oddfellows, government, local and national government. Um, all orchestrated by the Jesuits, and it was Pope Pius IX that was an integral part of this. They had no money, and the Rothschilds backed them to go out there and wipe everything out. And of course, then we had the boom of the Industrial Revolution and then petroleum, which they all find became very financially powerful as a result of that, and into positions where they were controlling governments. So it was the Jesuits, but behind all that, the Rothschilds. It's greed, power, and control. We were having energy created by the ether for free, and of course that has a conflict of interests if you're trying to get people to burn fossil fuels. And also free travel. Some people refer to the period of time that we would say the Tartarian Empire as the empire of free travel. People were traveling freely across the earth in airships. And they didn't want that either. So we had the introduction of the passport. Um, so it was basically starting again by suppressing absolutely everything in order for certain people to make an incredible amount of money and control who has what and how much of it they can have.
So you think they're just kind of leaking out technology a little bit here, a little bit there, making money off of it, and just kind of, well, that would make a lot of sense. I mean, because you have this nothingness that seems to be most of history, and then all of a sudden you have a boom of technology happening around I mean, real early 1900s, I guess you could say. A real the cars and the 40s is really when it took off, but it's pretty mind blowing. And biblically, you hear a similar story. You're talking about the kill offs that happened, and the story of Moses talks about that. The children of Israel became too many, and they wanted to kill them all, so they killed all and then Herod, the king of
Mm.
Idumea, the Romans, they killed them. They had a big kill off of all the children of Israel. And so I believe this is happening right now. We have a lot of this stuff. We can go on about that, but we don't want to get banned from YouTube or anything. But there's a kill off that keeps happening, it seems like. And then the Freemasonry thing is an interesting subject to me. I'm not a Freemason. My uncle was the potentate of the shrine, climb Freemasonry. There's a lot of people from my family that have been Freemasons, and I almost joined myself because I was like, well, it seems like a very good organization. Most of the people that I know that are in it are very successful and good people, etc. But then I did some research, and I'm thinking maybe I don't know what I'm getting myself into. Maybe I should just stick away from this for a little while and see what it is. So, um, how is Freemasonry playing a toll in this, or playing a part in um, the hiding of Tartaria, and really all of this stuff? I know that they hold a lot of secrets in Freemasonry, or at least they say they do. As a former Mason, I know you can't divulge everything. I mean, you probably could, but some people wouldn't, But what can you divulge to us that makes sense in this whole thing?
There is a document that is circulating on the internet. I have it. Lots of people have shared it in Tartaria groups on Facebook. That was taken from the Freemasons' archives that states that they were instructed to help in the removal of Tartaria from history. So that's whether they were going into libraries, people's houses, and taking maps, atlases, globes, any documentation they could find, they were instructed across the world. And Freemasonry goes back to Hiram, which is a Rothschild family, goes back to Hiram, who was Hiram Abiff was the architect of King Solomon's Temple, and this is Atlantean technology and knowledge being shared. So what started off as a group of very skilled stonemasons, and if you like, architects in a way that understood sacred geometry and frequency, it was slowly infiltrated again by the Jesuits, the Illuminati, and other nefarious factions, um, infiltrated it and then sort of turned it into what it is today. So you've got these first 3 degrees, craft, where you have apprentice, Fellowcraft and Master Mason, which is what I am, and that's where most people get to, and they stay there. And then beyond that, it's when it becomes darker and the information isn't shared, and that's where I think a lot of the key information is given out. And then you've got these offshoots called chapter, like Knights Templar. So the Freemasons, along with everything else, every organization, every religion, was all infiltrated by the Jesuits at around the same time. So the Freemasons are just one of many organizations that have been hijacked and used for nefarious reasons for again, greed, control, and to be instructed to actually help remove every single trace of Tartaria. It is there for everybody to see, and they can search online. But there's also a CIA document that was declassified in 1999, stating that all about the suppression of Tartaria, why it was removed, why they didn't want anybody talking about it, and a lot of that happens to be connected to the fact that they wanted Russia, which was one of the key parts of the empire, to appear backward, that they were technologically backward in comparison to the Western world. And the CIA actually have this document online. You can get it on their archives, showing you in black and white why they did it. And it actually has one sentence in it that says, mate, in no uncertain terms, we are stating here that Tartaria and all evidence of it is to be completely removed.
Yeah, and I'll put that document up because I think I have a copy of that document for people that are still skeptical that this even existed. I remember talking to somebody that I consider a scholar and talking about Tartaria, and they kind of curled their eyes up. I don't know. They curled their eyes doesn't sound the same as what I'm thinking, but
I know
they looked
exactly
at
what you're
me. They looked
thinking.
at me. They looked at me sideways. Like kind of like
Mm.
And then they researched it, and they were mind blown like me. So like anybody that's actually going to look into this, they're going to be blown. Flamenco is a author. I don't have all. I think I have almost all of his volumes. I think there's like one that still hasn't been translated that I haven't found anybody to be able to translate for me, or I haven't really actively tried. Maybe if you have a copy, I'd love to read that. But interesting stuff because he goes into the saints and the ideas about like the halo on the head. Where does that come from? And um, a lot of it makes a lot of sense, and that's the weird thing. But the idea of it being in Russia was something that I was like, this is so you're saying that this is Michael the Prince. And there was a lot of things in it that I'm like, I don't know if I can jive with it, but a lot of it was super interesting and made so much sense that it was mind blowing. Him and Velikovsky and people like that have got some interesting takes on some of these things. And of course, Velikovsky, I don't think he talks about Tartaria as much as like the changing of and wiping outs of civilizations and stuff along those lines. Um, the Satan's Little Season thing, a lot of people believe that we're in Satan's Little Season now. There's a lot of people coming out talking about it. And I feel like it all stemmed from Tartaria, the research of Tartaria, because I never heard anybody talk about that before. This is a new eschatological viewpoint of the scripture. No, none of the church fathers, Antonician, or nonetheless thought we were in Satan's little season. But now, of course, we here are 2,000 years later, and it's starting to look like there's people trying to put this together. And so I don't even know what to make of it all. I'm a panologist, so it all pan out eventually. So like eschatology wise, it'll all pan out. I'll figure it out when it comes to play. But I'm interested to see, other than Flamenco's research on that, is there any other evidences that people should see in the correlation of that being Jesus Christ's kingdom, Tartaria, other than what Flamenco had to say and some of the things you were saying?
He wasn't alone. Anatoly Fomenko was only one of three or four Russian scientists and mathematicians that actually wrote about this in a similar period of time. This was really the 70s that it came out. I'll have to send you the names of them because I can't pronounce one of them. One of them I've forgotten, and none of the books, apart from Anatoly's, were actually ever printed in English. They're all in Russian, and I can't find a translation of them. But I've got information on them. So no, it seems to be that people in Russia, that had been researching this were the ones that really wanted to scream about it because they felt that their country had been, I suppose, doctored. Their history had been doctored. Their capabilities and what they had achieved had been completely removed. Um, and most people would have, until relatively recently, a quite dim view on Russia as it being a bit behind us and with the communism. And, we see a little bit like we see North Korea today. They're always perceived in a primitive way in comparison to the rest of the world. So Anatoly Fomenko is really the key figure with his research into the new chronology is where people want to dig. But there is evidence on old maps as well. So if you find an old map of Russia and you look at Siberia, it was called Archangel. It was Archangel before it was Russia, before it was Siberia. And there are lots of areas and regions around northern Russia as well that have biblical names. So old atlases and encyclopedias are certainly worth looking at. And you can see that a lot of places in the world went through name changes, but more so in Russia. They were burying areas. There are areas there that have biblical references throughout the sort of northern hemisphere.
And the genocide that took place over the Slavic people is just astounding. I mean, talk about a something that a lot of people have no idea about. They have no clue. I mean, everybody's focused in on Germany and all that, but man, when you really look at what happened over in Russia, it makes Germany look like it was just like a little child's play game in comparison. It's pretty amazing. So I want to focus in on something you talked about, 99 degrees of Freemasonry. And look, me and you could talk for hours because I see that like every subject that you talk about, you have a blog with it and you're well written, well researched. And so we're going to have to do this again. This is just like kind of a preliminary
Hmm.
interview. I would hope that we do this again because there's so much to talk about. So other than William Schnoebelen, who was in Freemasonry, at least this is his story. I can't verify nor confirm he's got pictures and stuff that lead me to believe he's telling the truth, but he was a very high degree Freemason. I believe that he said that he made it to the 99th degree. And you wrote about this just, I think it was last week, maybe it was last week. I think on your blog you wrote about 99 degrees. Either that or I just came across the blog last week. Um, what's up with that? I mean, because I thought there was only 33rd degree. Because other than William Schnoebelen, I've never heard anybody say that. So, what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so we have these 33 degrees that we all hear about, and we hear about the odd person that claims to be a 33rd degree Freemason. But to the best of my knowledge, and for 20 years in amongst it all, and with some very, very high ranking Freemasons, way higher than I would ever have been able to get to. If you're 33rd degree, you don't discuss it, nobody knows.
Hmm.
So when someone comes out and says they're a 33rd degree Freemason, I'm always a little bit cynical because as far as I was told for 20 years that that's something that nobody would ever have any knowledge of. All we know is sat at the very top of Freemasonry is the Queen's cousin, the Duke of Kent. He sits at the very top, so we can assume that he is 99 level. um, so yeah, so you've got these 33 degrees that we know about, that they call light degrees, where each time you progress, you become more illuminated. And that's represented here in the UK on the back of our banknotes. You start off with the £5 notes, which basically says all I have to offer is blood, sweat, and tears. And then when you get further up, it starts to say reading is knowledge, you're becoming illuminated. And then when you get to the £50 note, that this is the beginning of things to come and only a shadow of what's possible. So we have a lot of Masonic symbology showing you that the higher the degree within the 33 degrees, the more illuminated you become. And that's metaphorical, saying that the more knowledge you've gained and the more power you can have and the more money you can accumulate as a direct result. But after that, there is this second set of degrees, 66 degrees, that are dark. And that is where this sort of satanic spin comes on it, where we start talking about, are they worshipping Baphomet? Well, from my research, yes, that does appear to be the case. Who ultimately is it that's controlling all of this? Everything points to the demiurge. We don't know exactly what that is. Um, but I guess this is something that can appear in whatever form is relevant to you. So if you think that that's Baphomet, then that's what you're going to see. And this is what's linked to allegations of blood sacrifice and these very dark rituals. But no one knows for sure what these 99 degrees are. We know what the first 33 are. We know what they're called. We know what you have to do. You know, we know all about Scottish Rite and the Knights Templars and so on. But the 99 degrees are buried deep. No one knows what they actually are. All we know is that is where this whole spin of this sort of satanic dark side of Freemasonry comes from, because on the surface it's a organization that's fraternity, brotherly love, helping each other out, raising money for charity. That's the big push, that at the lower rungs you're raising money for charity. But after the first 33, that is a closed shop for the average person. We are talking about these blood families, and then inviting people in that maybe are key to helping them, you know, achieve their goals. But yeah, the demiurge is what they refer to as the person that they're worshipping right at the very top. And I've got them written down somewhere. Um, the older I get, the worse my memory becomes. And I found that the more information I take in, the harder it is to actually, unless I write it down. And that's actually why I wrote my first book, because my wife said to me that I've been in and out of the doctors for years trying to get help with my memory. And I thought at one point maybe I had very early dementia. So I wrote my book because I didn't want to lose the information I had and not be able to actually share it with my children. And that was actually my fear. Um, but in amongst here somewhere, I mean, people are probably better off going to my blog if they want to actually get specifics on it, because it,
Speaking of that, before we go much further, tell people how they can check out your blog. I know that for me, I'm on Facebook and I'm a part of your page on Facebook, but
yes.
yes, how is there another way that people can get a hold of that too?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is probably the best place to get any of my information from, which is the Tartarian Empire.co.uk. And they can get books on that. But there are also links on there. So if they want to go on the Facebook page, they can. There's a link on there, and they can just click on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. But the blogs, a lot of the blogs that I put on there, I've put on there simply because I can't put them on Facebook because I don't want to be shut down, and I've been there before,
Yeah.
and it's took me a long time. But uh, the a lot of the information on there is sensitive, I
Mhm.
suppose you could say, like, you know, the Freemasons and who I believe the Antichrist is, and so on. So I've got to be a little bit careful. But just going back to what I was saying, I never actually set out to write a book. I wanted to document all of my research, and it sounds a bit strange, before I forgot it.
Mhm. Makes
And
sense.
it's just something that I'm battling with all the time. I've have constantly notes all over the place, and I
Mhm.
just don't seem to be able to retain anything unless I've written it down. And
Mhm.
then it gets lost up in here somewhere in my own ether.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to your 99 degrees question, the 66 are well hidden. They're not documented. You can't find any books on it. It's dark, and it's something that I'm constantly trying to get more information on. But there's no one out there talking about it. No one seems to know anything about it.
And that's why it makes me wonder with the William Schnoblin whether or not, because like I said, I can't verify that any of his story is true. I interviewed him and actually put that in the comment down there, but it's interesting some of the stuff he talks about, like, the blood ritual,
Mm,
vampirism, and all the weird stuff that is associated. And, as far as the Baphomet goes, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a Freemason, but I do know that high level people in the record industry, Baphomet is the kind of patron god of that. And I've heard that, I don't know if the stories about the Templars are true or not, but according to the Catholic Church anyway, they had a Baphomet. And so that, as far as back as a life, I guess Eliphas Levi was the one to draw this Baphomet. it goes back pretty far, and it seems like it's some kind of controlling entity over dominions of the earth. Um, in Freemasonry, what is Baphomet considered? I mean, it's obviously a goat man, he, she type thing.
Yeah, you can see why it's popular in Hollywood
Yeah.
because we've got this huge push at the moment, haven't we? Everybody's talking about this, and we can't now determine. I mean, every time I put a post up about someone will message me and say, that's a woman. That's an inversion, and it's got to a point now where it doesn't matter what celebrity someone talks about. In certain circles, there will be someone, or maybe a group of people, will say, "Well, that's actually a man. That's actually a woman," and you can see the importance that Baphomet plays in that. When I joined the Freemasons, there were so many people telling me that I was going to have sex with a goat to join. Now that goat comes from somewhere, and it is Baphomet. And I recently went to Tamar in Portugal, which is, if you like, the original headquarters of the Knights Templar. And there was one book that I found in the Convent of Christ when I was looking around. There was one book in English, and I opened it up with the tour guide that took us around, and the page opened on Baphomet. Baphomet is very much key to these people and their agenda, and I think that is the kind of, we become one sex, if you like. There is no male and female. There's one sex, one religion, one world order, one currency, where we're almost homogenized. Everything becomes exactly the same. And I think that that's what they're trying to do. And Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of England, or the UK, he has his own faith foundation, which is pushing for one world religion. And he's also pushing to be put in as the Prime Minister for Europe, the European Prime Minister. So there's something going on, and it's very much focused, I think, around Baphomet and what Baphomet represents.
Absolutely. I was told in the Order of the Odd Fellows, and I remember on the Little Rascals, they had the ride the goat ritual. I think there was a whole episode called Ride the Goat on the Little Rascals. And so there is something to all that, something very dark and sinister. I'm sure that there are people that will contact you and reach out to you that will have stories after this episode. At least I hope so, because people reach out to me all the time about weird things. Even one guy had what he calls the oldest lodge in the Northeast up there near DC and all that, and he owns that property there, and he claims to have seen Baphomet in the house, and the whole house is built on Masonic principles. As he sent me the layout, it's really interesting. So you never know what kind of people you're going to meet. So I hope you learn more. I know I'm curious as well. I'm trying to learn more and more about all of these different things because they're fascinating to me. And I don't know, I think sometimes you think you know, but you don't know. So I want to say this, man, we're going to have you back on. This doesn't seem like long enough, but I have an interview lined up directly after this. And so we're going to do this again very, very soon. If you guys liked having Guy on, please hit the thumbs up. Guy, tell them once again where they can find your stuff. Are you on YouTube as well? And if so, let us know, and I'll put the links in the description there.
Yeah, so the best place is my website because they can link then to YouTube, Facebook, wherever, and it's the tartarianempire.co.uk.
Thank you so much, Guy. We appreciate it. And hit the like, guys. Hit the subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
The world keeps lying, but he won't retreat on his quest for truth. Yeah. Truth, quest for truth. They can't stop me, they can't block me. Moving through, got that fire, they can't block me. Quest for truth, breaking chains, making waves.